everybody, and welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and I am joined by some very awesome friends that are fellow podcasters with the Spirit World Center podcast. So, welcome to the show, guys. Introduce yourselves, and I hope you guys will tell us all about the wonderful topic of shamanism today.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm Eric, and I'm joined here by Laova.
Hello, everyone.
And we are from the Spirit World Center. And at the Spirit World Center, we provide online instruction in things like shamanism and mediumship and working with the spirits, really, through various means, ceremony and all that type of thing. And one of the main modalities that we offer and teach in terms of working with the spirit world is shamanism, and we're very excited to be talking about this topic with you today.
Yes, we are. Thank you for having us.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you guys here talking about this. And the cool thing about it is there's so many different avenues that I've seen that people have talked about with shamanism and how they practice it. And it kind of varies from practitioner to practitioner. So if you could tell the audience a little bit about what shamanism is and kind of where your practice kind of begins with it.
Well, to start off, a distinction that I always like to make is to make the distinction between shamanism and a Native American religion. And I think it's something that definitely that delineation has to be drawn. Otherwise, people start to get into really iffy things of cultural appropriation and all that. Shamanism, though, it's something that exists cross-culturally and throughout history. If you go, way back in the human record, anywhere on Earth, you're going to find shamanism is kind of the first inklings of spiritual practice, and it's because of a very simple reason, and that is that it's based on trance. So it's based on a human ability that it's our birthright. We are born with it. We can enter into trance, and there's interesting things that fall out of it. And this is why shamanism exists really within any culture and throughout history. It's kind of like water, right? It can be poured into any type of glass, right? The glass is the culture, the water exists within that culture, but it's its own pure thing that just keeps arising. And the reason for that is this, once again, I come back to trance. And really humans can enter into trance, and so can many other animals, right? It's this neurological thing that can happen, but it has these wonderful effects on our consciousness. And it really comes down to that the human brain is wired for survival in a very amazing way, right? Just through evolution and all this, it acts as a filtering mechanism. There's all this data that comes in from the outside world. Imagine walking through a jungle. You have all the trees and the leaves and the dirt and all the insects and all the sounds, and there's literally a near infinite amount of information and data in any instant as you walk through that. And so the human brain has become very good at filtering out everything that it finds irrelevant and only focusing on those things that it finds to be useful. And in terms of evolution, the things that are useful are what looks good to eat and also what looks like it's going to eat me. And so the brain really filters out so much else, right? I mean, imagine walking through the city as well. You get off a subway, you're walking through the city, there's people in business suits, there's all the cracks in the sidewalk, there's everyone's different, fashion and all this. There's so much information, but our brain is able to focus just on certain things. Well, shamanism, and particularly entering into trance, basically shuts off that filtering part of the brain. It's very similar to what Aldous Huxley was saying in his book, The Doors of Perception, when it came to understanding the effect of hallucinogens on human perception, right? That you would expect that, in essence, these hallucinogens shut off the brain and allow you to experience this world in a way that's not being filtered down. You're getting all this data that you wouldn't ordinarily see, and this, of course, has been backed up by various studies in, let's say, mushroom users as well, where they look at the brain activity in someone who's having a mushroom trip. And instead of seeing this, someone's having a trip, right? So you expect all this activity all throughout the brain, right? And you actually see reduced activity in the brain. So it's actually about getting the brain out of the way. And this, of course, is the power of trance, that you're causing a neurological change within the organism that then basically shuts off that filter and allows the being to have this unmediated experience of reality. And of course, some of the things that are being filtered out are things like the spirit world, are things like the spiritual energies around you. These aren't necessary for survival, for evolution, but when you start working with those spirits, it absolutely is something that is very useful. And so shamans throughout history, they're the ones who enter into trance, and then when they're in that trance, they send their consciousness, they connect with their consciousness to these extended realms, to the spirit world, and they then engage in communication with those other consciousnesses on behalf of their community. And so this is really what shamanism has been, and this is why it's just really such an ancient thing, because it really goes back to the beginnings of the human experience. You can just imagine someone sitting around a fire very early in human evolution, and just sitting around that fire, watching that fire, entering into a bit of trance, and then suddenly looking around and saying, "Whoa, this world is different than what we thought."
Mm-hmm.
And so this is very much what shamanism is about. And of course, that trance has been entered into in so many different ways, right? It can be entered into through, as I said before, the use of hallucinogenics, and also through things that are kind of trials of ordeals, such as there's some shamans in the past who poison themselves so that they are going through so much pain that their consciousness leaves their body. Others, they would go to the point of exhaustion, dance to the point of exhaustion, or starve themselves in order to enter that trance state. Of course, the safest way to enter into the trance state that we find and that we teach is listening to drumming. And when you listen to drumming at about 210 beats per minute, it just has this effect on your neurology to turn off that brain, enter you into trance, and allow you to have this experience of these extended realms, and therefore also experience the spirits around you and also the spirit world itself. So that's shamanism in a nutshell.
That is a beautiful description of shamanism, and it really sparks so many different ideas and points that I would love to talk about as well. As somebody who's chronically ill, shamanistic trances are actually one of the ways that I actually help deal with my pain. I will kind of go into I think the medical community calls it biofeedback is what it's actually called, but to me it's trance. There's no differentiation between the two, for me at least. uh how do you feel about using, I guess you could call it biofeedback, but trance like states as a way of not only kind of dipping into your spiritual consciousness, but also tapping into that healing mindset?
Absolutely. I mean, trance is a powerful way of really getting the ego and getting the mind out of the way. And so when we're talking about healing, right, trance is especially useful for energy healing. I find that one of the key things when you're doing certain energy healings, and such as laying on of hands, is allowing your consciousness to get out of the way and just allowing that flow of energy to come through you. So once again, you want to turn off that brain. You want to take that consciousness that's doubting or and put it aside and allow things to flow.
It is like being a hollow bone, and you let the energy go through you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I completely agree with that. When I've done Reiki sessions, that's kind of also, I kind of I guess the best way to like really put it is to the visualization of almost kind of hollowing out to give basically moving everything out of the way for that energy to transfer through you. And it's a very interesting state, especially, you know, when I've taught Reiki classes and you have to kind of explain that imagery to someone who may not understand it. It's very difficult to kind of get past that barrier. So if you guys are teaching about shamanism to your community, or teaching someone how to get into that trance-like state, what is kind of your, I guess you could say, like, top information or top tips that you would give somebody who's maybe learning about that?
Yeah, sure. This, and I think it is the top question that we have is like, if I don't get into a trance, how can I get there? Like there's many blockages. But the main advice I have is really to make your brain or your rational side, if you want, collaborate with your intuitive side, you know, like your right brain collaborate with your left brain. And to do that, I say, you know, if you want to go into a trance and you are someone that have difficulty to let go of control, that you have someone that needs to stay in control of situation, or just let loose in general, then you do it in a small time. You know, you say, okay, for the next, let's say 5 minutes, 1 minute, even if 5 is too much, you do small step. Just tell your brain, okay, for the next 5 minutes, we'll just put you aside, okay? And when we come back, you will be able to critique, analyze, do anything you want about the experience.
Be skeptical.
Yeah. And then, but for the next 5 minutes, we're gonna be in our heart, in our intuition. We're gonna go down in the heart, because I found that the spirit communication or trance is all about heart-based communication. It's all getting from that place of intuition, of sensing, feeling without necessarily putting a word on something, and just a kind of an inner knowing. And then your senses are just, well, making sense of what you're feeling in your heart in some way. But I think that the big barrier is really, really like the brain that wants to analyze, the brain that doubt. Also, a lot of conditioning of like, okay, is it just my imagination? Is it real? Am I going crazy? This kind of question. Is people thinking I'm being how do you say that? People think you are not
imagining things or creating it.
Yeah, or just you know, when you're not scientific enough, it's like you're not how do you say that? It's like people don't trust you because it's not science proof, you know. It's more
yes,
your
based in
guts.
science, or based in the facts, essentially.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you don't want to repress, you know, you don't want to completely get rid of your critical faculties or your skepticism or anything. It's more like you make a deal with it, right? You make a deal. Okay, look, you can, you tell your left brain. I always get the left brain, right?
Mm-hmm. It's just the rational one,
right? You tell your left brain, look, I'm going to have this experience. Let me have this experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let me really soak it in. And then afterwards, when it's all done, after it's committed to memory and I've had this experience, you can go nuts with, you know, assessing it and critiquing it and trying to understand it. But while we're having that experience, you leave it alone. You let my right brain and you let me experience it.
Especially when it comes to shamanic journeying. And shamanic journeying is like a vivid dream, right? It's like you walk in the dream and you're living it and you feel like you're having some kind of control, but at the same time you're following a big flow and the flow is carrying you somewhere, and it's beautiful symbiosis with the spirit world. But when you have a vivid dream, well, you're dreaming. You're not trying to interpret the dream as you dream, you're just living it. And then after you write about it, you think about it, and so on. So it's the same when you're having the experience. You don't want your brain to be like, oh, what about this? Is that true or not? It's like, look, if you're unsure, just give the benefit of the doubt, and then you'll think about it later. Yeah, that would be my number one suggestion.
You want to get that self-censorship, and you want to put it to one side for a time. And it also, just to clarify, with shamanic journeying, right, that's where you've gone to trance, and you're basically sending your consciousness over to the spirit world, where you're having this co-created lucid dream-like experience, and with the spirits. And something that I also tell people with that is that it is a co-creation, right? If you're having a shamanic journey, there are times when you have to will things to happen, when you will and imagine and visualize yourself going and, say, opening a door, right? Not everything is just going to flow into you. Right. But at the same time, there's those things that do flow into you. And I often describe, and those things that flow are the things that are coming from spirit, right? And so it's this communication where you're saying, okay, I open the door, and then they show you what's behind it. It's very much, I like to actually sometimes describe it as like Dungeons and Dragons. It's like when you're the player, and then there's the dungeon master on the other side. Well, the dungeon master is in essence the spirits in the spirit world that's creating this experience for you. And so, the dungeon master, he paints the scene, right? He's like, okay, you walk into this room and there's 3 doors, right? And so you, though, as the player, that is flowed into your consciousness, this room with 3 doors. And you don't feel like you created that in the experience. And then you have to visualize and will yourself to go and open one of those doors, right? That's your part in this co-creation. And then once you do that, then the flow starts again, and the dungeon master says, oh, you've opened this door, and behind it is this giant snake, or but it is
snake spirit, hello.
And so this is the give and take. So I always like to tell people, look, there are going to be parts of the journey that you feel like you're making up, and it should be that way. Yeah. Because you're doing half of the communication, and then they are communicating back with their own imagery.
And this is something that we find in not just in the shamanic journeying, but in a lot of practice that we have that can even be more, what is it, like common, like when you're doing art, for example. Let's say you're doing a painting, and then you feel inspired and you start to paint, I don't know, a flower, and then somehow you have a conversation with that flower somehow, because you're looking at it, and then you're like, oh, this is what come out of my creation. Now it's coming back to you inside of you as you see it, and like, oh, what will I do next? And then you respond to what you're seeing, and then you put it on the painting again, and it's just a back and forth. And it is the same with the journey.
Yes, that makes perfect sense, because and I love that analogy is with it as well, because I also I'm a landscape painter, so I completely understand the entire reference of that, because it's true. There'll be times where I'll be sitting there looking at the canvas and then be like, oh, hey, I want to paint this, or I see a picture of something in nature that I'm like, oh, I'd love to paint that. But my interpretation of that I don't know if it's spirit-led or creativity-led or whatever you would like to call it, comes out completely different, because it has my energy infused into it. So I like the way that you guys were describing that, and that's probably the hardest thing to explain to people, at least for me, when you're explaining how shamanic journeys work and trance journeys work, of saying, hey, part of this is going to have to come from you. You have to do part of the visualization. Like, you have to kind of give a space or create a space for those spirits to come to, but your interactions with them are going to be totally unique to you. They're not going to be like this. I can tell you that the room, looks like it's got green walls and a door over here, and you've got this nice little couch settee looking thing that you can sit on and talk to them with. But how you see that's going to be individual to you. And then when your spirit comes to communicate with you, you can ask them questions, but what you hear is going to be them, not your brain. And you have to tell your brain enough. That's not you making it up. That's you saying, hey, they're talking to me. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's very hard to get that left brain to go, oh no, I just made that up. Did you? Are you sure? And it kind of, I have to kind of laugh when I'm telling, people, like, I've had students say, hey, I'm pretty sure I made up this entire interaction. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Go think on it for a week. And then they'll come back and say, the thing that they told me was going to happen actually happened. And I said, well, did you make it happen?
Yeah.
And they said, no, I couldn't have made that happen. And I said, then did you make up the conversation like you thought you did? And they're like, maybe not. And it freaks them out, but at the same time, they kind of get that, like, oh my God, this actually happened excitement. And it's the most exciting thing to see when that spark finally
Yes.
hits.
Yes.
And then you're just like, oh, wow, you got it. There you go. Now go take it and run away and have fun. Go play.
And one of the wonderful thing we also say to our students, because it happened, it's like it cannot not happen at the beginning. It's a phase.
Yes.
and it's okay. And what we say is like, you should make a list of all these magical moments, the synchronicities, these strange thing that happened to you that you cannot explain, or that you feel like it's really, wow, it's not just me, it was spirit led, or like there was something going on there. And every time that you are insecure, or you doubt about what's going on, or you feel you're going crazy, well, then you read that list and like, okay, this is real. I cannot explain this, I cannot explain that, and I have to, it's getting easier to stay more, I would say, confident about what is happening when you start building a little list of it.
Because otherwise, all these little synchronicities and weird paranormal events and everything, they get forgotten.
Yeah.
Right. And so you want this list of confirmation events. So you can go to it and say, oh, wow, this has been my life. That's some stuff I can't explain. Obviously, this is happening. And, confirmation events can be small, they can be big. But I mean, Laova, you even had that big confirmation event when Laova was quite advanced into shamanism when she started questioning for a time whether she was just going nuts.
Yeah.
and we had a huge confirmation event come out of that.
Yeah. That's true. I was questioning myself, being like, okay, all the work I'm doing, is this just like a fantasy? Am I just like making that up, and so on? And so I asked one of the spirits I work with, I'm like, okay, can I have a proof that I'm not going crazy, please? Because I really need it right now. And so I decided to go on a shamanic journey. And by that time, Eric was,
yeah, from my perspective, I guess it's useful from my perspective, and then we can get to yours. And basically, Laova was going into her shamanic journey, and so she's taking over the bedroom, and she's on her bed listening to her drum track and blindfolded, and so I'm out of the room, and while that's happening, I go to the washroom, and I'm on my phone while in the washroom, and I come across this YouTube video of David Lynch. And if anyone knows David Lynch, he's a director who did Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive. He does this very dreamlike type of film, and this 2-minute video is him talking about how the creative person is like a spider weaving reality.
Wow.
And I thought that really struck me while I was watching it. And something else struck me. It was like, this is important. For some reason, this is very important. I need to send this. I need to text this to Laova right now. And it felt like it was time sensitive. Like if I showed it to her after, it would be too late. and that I just needed the timestamp on it, and I just needed to get it to her and to her phone right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part too is that he never sent me like videos. I mean, when we lived together, he could have waited and just show me the video
Right.
after, right? So it's like, it was weird to text me a video. It's just like, he never does that.
And so I know that there's something going on here. I just have this deep-seated feeling. And so I see that I go in the room, and Laova's just coming out of her journey.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I go and I sit beside her, and I'm just, for some reason, I'm giddy like a schoolgirl. I'm just like, I'm like all excited because I know that there's something big about her seeing this video. And so before I show her the video, before I have her check her phone, I'm like, okay, so Laova, what was your journey? And so Laova, go ahead.
So my journey was that I was with one of my spirit guide, and we were walking in a infinite kind of cosmic room, totally made up with spider webs. And there was just a little path where we were walking, just enough, just enough space for us to walk. And my spirit guide says, well, you know that the spiders are the one that creates reality. They are weaving a reality. And that was my journey.
And so I hear that, and I'm just like, okay, Laova, look at your phone. And of course, then Laova sees this video of David Lynch talking about spiders as the weavers of reality.
And then I felt mentally healthy. Yeah.
That is very, very awesome, and an incredible journey as well. And the funny thing is, I have a kind of similar spider experience as well. That a few weeks ago, I was not in a great place mentally. I was, we've all been there through the pandemic, but it was a really rough moment for me because I was having some issues with my MS, and I'm standing in my shower, and I'm basically kind of silently screaming at my deities and just saying, I feel really alone. I don't feel okay. I feel really sick. Please, I need something. And I'm not comfortable with spiders, but I have a lot of spiders in my house. And I just kind of let them be because, I live on a farm. And so I'm like, as long as you eat the bugs and you don't crawl on me or get too close to me, we'll be fine. You can stay in your corner, I'll stay in mine. It's totally cool. And so this little daddy long leg crawls down from its corner in my shower where it resides and literally gets just about a foot away from me, and it's just out of like the range of the water, and it's just there, and it literally like reaches out one little arm to me and just holds it there. And I'm like,
Aww.
This is the weirdest thing on the face of the, what the hell are you doing? And I literally just sat there. I'm like, dude, you're gonna get, like, the water's gonna hit you, you're gonna die, you're gonna drown. Please go back up to your web. Don't touch me. And it just kind of held out its little arm to me, and it never moved from that spot the whole time I was in the shower. And when I turned the water off, it started to turn and go right back up. But it was really strange because after that moment of I feel really alone, this little spider comes in. It's like, I'll come keep you company.
Oh, that's so cute.
And I'm just like, okay. I don't like spiders at all, but that was really sweet. So me and the spider are friends now. And I don't know why the spider did that, but like, it was the strangest, most kind of healing moments in that thing. And it was weird because after my shower, I felt totally fine. Like all of the issues that I had in my brain that was, making me freak out in that moment were just kind of gone. They all just kind of washed down the drain as the spider hung out with me. And I'm like, that was some serious Loki energy. I don't know why he would do this, but Loki is very well known in my household for doing stuff like that. And I'm just like, that was sweet. Thanks, dude. Okay.
Oh, I'm just like, I have the image of the little leg, like, hello.
Like
my
at one
heart
point in time,
is
I almost
melting.
actually tried to touch its leg, and I'm like, no, I will freak out if that thing actually touches me. So no, we're not going to touch. I'll just wave at you. It's fine. But it
Yeah.
was so
Oh,
adorable and so sweet. And it was such a crazy spiritual thing that, like, somebody would explain that to you and they'd just be like, oh, a spider kept you company. And it's like, no, a spider kept me company during an emotional moment of my life.
yeah.
Oh,
And I
Yeah.
cannot explain how spiritual it was, but it
Mm.
was so mundane that you're just like, wow, okay. And my
oh,
spiders don't do that. They kind of keep to themselves, and I've got spiders that live in my plants and do their job, and we're fine. But it was just a very profound, amazing moment. So I completely agree with the fact that you had this amazing experience of how the spiders weave our realities. I think the spiders are definitely something that we take for granted in the terms of spirituality.
it's one of those things. I mean, that's the big difference between a coincidence and a synchronicity, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
meaning inherent to it. And this is why it can be so difficult to express a synchronicity, because otherwise people are just seeing it as these events that lined up. They're not seeing the meaning that it had, the actual communication it had for you in your life that just seemed completely and utterly unlikely to happen, but that has this deep, deep impact
Mm-hmm.
on you, So always it's always amazing to keep a list of those things so that you can remember, okay, we're never alone. The spirits are there, and we are surrounded by wonderful allies.
Absolutely. And kind of talking a little bit about allies and all that, how does your shamanic work with your, spirit guides and your deities? How does that all play out together for you?
I'd say it's almost inseparable, isn't it? Go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. Oh, it's I don't know where to start. Um, I would say that for me, shamanic work is foremost healing, for personal healing for me. And because, you can also, other people, they can, do more divination or other type of work. For me, it's about personal healing and also creativity. That's the
Mm-hmm.
two way I work with the spirit. And when it comes to personal healing, personal transformation, like I will work with the spirits in a way that they have a role in my life. So, if I need some nurturing energy, I will go to a certain spirit. If I need to be disciplined, I will go to another spirit. And they are my guide. They really kind of guide me through life like that, and they help me a lot to help me kind of let go of what needs to be letting go, to find my power, to stay in my power, and also to retrieve. They call it soul retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
So to retrieve part of myself, integrated them, and heal myself in that way. And yeah, I don't know if it's answer your questions or
No, that definitely answers my question. The cool thing about shamanism and like astral work and any sort of trance work for me is the big part is like that's one of the main ways that I communicate with my deities is obviously I do my altar work and I do all of that and kind of I guess you could I don't like to use the term prayer, but I guess prayers is probably the easiest common term
yeah.
when working with sending any sort of message up to them. But a lot of times for me, any sort of like shamanic work or anything like that, I like going into that trance like state to go to a kind of temple space that I have set up for them for us to communicate with each other, because I like that I can kind of almost break down the barrier, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
the cool thing about it is when I've done that, I have gotten to meet new gods that have come in that are like, hey, I want to work with you. And it's like, I don't think I've ever wanted to work with you, but sit down, we'll talk about it. And it's a very interesting kind of experience for that. So, do you guys have any kind of experiences with that, or does it just vary from person to person?
Well, I think that you're mentioning an interesting thing there that I just want to touch on first, and
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that shamanism and like things like shamanic journeying, right? Entering trance and connecting with the spirit world. It's really just one aspect of that kind of shamanic lifestyle.
Hmm.
I really don't like all these labels. Even the term shamanism, I'd happily drop it and just call us, trance entering spirit talkers. But that doesn't quite have the same
It doesn't
brand,
have
right?
the same ring.
And it's a tool and technique that is used within a lifestyle where you are working with the spirits in a lot of different ways. Otherwise, you're kind of missing out. So, Laova's routine, right? You're up doing your prayers, you're doing your altar work,
Yeah.
and then you do your journeying. Like,
I have trance postures that I like to do. There's journeying, there's prayers, there's singing or dancing. There's so many things you can do, and it's always about connecting with spirits, right? And
Mhm.
being in an altered state of mind. And even the altered state of mind, there's various altered state of mind, right? Like trance while dancing is not trance while sitting, and it's not trance while being journeying. It's all different type of places
Right.
of your mind can be, and that's a wonderful thing to explore. That's what it's infinite. So that's, like, if you can have a lot of fun with that. And to come back to the question about working with deities and how does it work? Yes, you can meet deities, and you're for me they appear in such mysterious ways.
and that's what I was getting at, that because there's like, we work with so many modalities here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that when we, let's say, meet with a new deity, it comes through in many different ways all at once. And so I was thinking the example of Aurora might be useful.
Oh yes, totally. So there was I was at a point in my practice that I wanted to find a magical name for my practice. And so I decided to do a journey to find out like any idea from my guides. And what I was seeing was, I just have the word in Latin, Aurora Borealis. And
Northern Lights, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And in French is Aurore Borealis. So I was like, oh, I had a French moment, sorry. And so it happens sometimes. And so I was seeing that and like, okay, Aurora Borealis. That was in my mind. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's the actual name, but I like Aurora. And so I keep that in mind. And then I come back from my journey, and we start doing bibliomancy to find kind of the rest of my name to go with it.
Where you're just kind of opening up a book and seeing, where your finger lies. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a blockage. What did I find again?
It was something about transformation. Yeah, it was transformation.
Yeah, transformation.
The word was transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very thick book, and my finger pointed transformation. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm all about transformation. And finally, we went on a web page.
Kind of a word generator, random word generator.
Yeah. And we played a little bit with it. And then we find a word in Latin, right?
In Latin, yeah.
In Latin.
What was it again? It was
Semita.
Semita.
And so Semita, which means path or walking the path. I'm not sure anymore. Anyway, so I'm like, Aurora Semita, that will be my name. And as I said that, there's a big like kaboom in the alley,
in the foyer, outside the door in the hallway. The door is closed, and we just hear what sounds like a pile of boxes. It's like 20 boxes high, all falling over slowly. And like and like it's falling against the door too, in a way where it's like the door almost looks like it's like vibrating.
It was vibrating, like you could, like, it was weird.
And it was one of the, and so she says her magical name for the first time, and then we just hear this like boom, 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 as things are falling outside the door. And we go around the entire house, and there's nothing that fell over could have caused that sound.
And even like our housemate, I heard it, and he was like, what was that? And he, like, we were not, there was nothing. That was so weird.
And so later, as we keep looking into the name, we find out, oh, okay, transformation is the Roman goddess Aurora. She's the goddess of transformation as well, right? And so we find that out, and actually, no, we found that out after, right? Because
after.
What happened next? Then I guess
I'm not sure
how'd she
anymore.
reach out? Okay. Anyways, we eventually.
I'm not sure anymore about the rest of the story.
And then we made contact through shamanic journey. Yeah. We made contact through shamanic journey with Aurora, right? I think she came to you.
I really can't remember. I'm just remembering the first part. Sorry.
Okay. Yes. Well, anyways, we eventually made contact with the goddess Aurora, and she takes credit for basically knocking at our door when we first said this magical name that was tying us to her, and so I mean, there can be many ways of working with a deity in this kind of spirit work, right? I mean, there's the shamanic journeying aspect, but then there's the, bibliomancy, there's kind of the external work that you do. There's paranormal events that you might experience that are that
was
being
incredible.
Coming through.
I was like, whoa, like how she did that. But I can't fully remember after the knockdown how we connect with her and so on, but we found out about her and she was like, yeah, it was me, haha. And that was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where the deities come through in many different ways. And I find also that paranormal events are, when you start working with the spirits, you better be ready for the occasional paranormal events. And it definitely, you get desensitized to it after a while. I mean, we've been at this for so long and so intensively that as you notice, we can't even remember how we made contact with the deity there, because it's like it's one thing among so many different paranormal events that we've experienced. But you get used to it after a while. But paranormality is another huge part of working with spirits.
There's a lot of initiation.
Yes.
And in it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an incredible thing. And it's funny how sometimes when a deity wants to work with you, they will present how they want to work with you in the most interesting kind of ways. And I think when I was on your show, I actually talked about how I started working with Thor. And how I had no intentions of working with Thor. And Thor kind of, I came into me during one of my shamanic trances, and he was like, yeah, we're going to work together. And I'm like, no, you're a little too fluffy for me, but thanks. And he got slightly offended that I called him fluffy. And that night we had a very strong lightning storm. And when I was like, okay, Thor, you can calm things down. I'd like, to keep my house standing. Thank you. And all I got in my head was, so you think I'm fluffy, huh? And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay, yeah, all right, we'll sit down and talk about this. Apparently, I don't get a say, but ultimately it was something that was a fun introduction to how we started working together. And looking back on it now, I can laugh at the fact that I called him fluffy, and it's something that is very endearing to the fact that we have a really strong bond with each other now that started as an insult.
It's really amazing how well defined the personalities of these various deities are. Now, as we were discussing on the interview with you on our podcast, you and we work with very similar, in fact, many of the same deities, and it's a wonderful thing to be having this conversation where, you know, your experiences of these beings is lining up with ours, and often, as we discussed on the other podcast, in ways that don't necessarily reflect how they are written in,
Yep.
you know, in the old myths. And so it's really, really wonderful to have that type of thing going on, right?
Yes, there's just so many like funny stories like that where they can surprise you. I remember one time I was journeying and I was doing psychopomp work, so helping, you know, the dead. And I you know, I have my routine. I have spirits that I work with for that particular task. And I was that day I was helping a Christian that was not sure if it was Christian anymore to go. We didn't know where to go. It's like, do I go to paradise? Where do I go? And now it was very funny because I just saw like kind of a slow motion of a man with a white beard and, you know, a white kind of cloth going down the sky, kind of slow motion, and just is kind of walking in the air, slowly coming down and taking its time and coming right next to me and starting to talk to that person, like, oh, you should come with me, and start trying to kind of sell a speech, but without being, while being very ambiguous about where it will be going. And like, wait a minute, I was already there. Who are you? Like, what are you doing there? And then I realized it was Odin. And
Sounds like Odin.
he says, if I can take one on my side, I will. So I'm like, okay, Odin, you do what you gotta do. And I was just not expecting that, just like pretty much cutting me in my speech and just like starting to talk as if I'm not there. And like, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I never had Odin, you know, I don't work with him in Journey, and I work with him in other ways, but it's the first time I have an apparition of him, especially out of the blues. And I didn't even know he was doing psychopomp work, but I then learned about the fact that he is a psychopomp. So I was very surprised. And then what is even more fascinating about that is that a week later, my sister called me and she's like, oh, you know what? I discovered that I can do psychopomp work with Odin. And we didn't even talk about this. We didn't even talk about that. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? Like,
that's awesome.
That was mind blowing. I was like, do you know what just happened to me? I had to tell her. That was crazy.
Oh, that is an incredible story. And it sounds just like something. And it was funny as you were describing it, I'm like, this is going to be Odin. She's going to be talking about Odin. And that's what's running through my head. And sure enough, yep, it's Odin. And it's funny, I have had Odin do, I guess you could say, outside of the norm kind of things, where, you know, he kind of will come in and like appear in that almost angelic kind of fashion, you know, minus the wings and all that, but you know, and he comes in that way. And then there's other times where he will come in completely in more of a feminine form. And there will be other times where he's in true Odin form, and I'm like, can you pick one? Because you're confusing me.
No,
pick
we
one,
can't.
Please. I don't care which one you pick. Just pick one. I have Loki over here deciding which one he's going to be on that day, and that's confusing enough. Can you just pick a form for me, please? And the funny thing is, too, I have Hell that does this as well. Hell will decide whether or not she wants to come in as her normal self, or if she wants to come in completely in corpse form. And that's a little alarming. The first time it happened, I'm like, what are you doing? And after she did it the first time, I was like, oh, why are you in that form? And she's like, I just felt like it. I'm like, okay, we're going with the creepy vibes today. That works. That's fine. I can live with that.
She is truly Loki's daughter.
Right?
I was going to say, you know, even with Loki, right, as we were discussing on the other podcast, Loki, of course, for those who work with him, comes through in many ways that are very different from how he's traditionally understood in the myth cycles, right? I mean, the cultural interpretation of Loki is that he's just this evil and that he's just this mischief maker, right? When in fact, when you work with him, you see that he's the divine trickster, and he's causing personal transformation. He has a very important role, and it's something that it's not what you're finding in a lot of the traditional cultural interpretations. But when you work with that being, absolutely, you are finding so much in terms of casting off your old ego and becoming something new. That transformative aspect of the trickster archetype,
breaking old structures, so you can rebuild new.
Absolutely.
Creating your own personal Ragnarok. Your old self is dead and you can rebuild a new one.
Yay.
And it's really funny about working with Loki, because I've been reading the book Loki and Sigyn by Leah Svedensen, and mainly I wanted the book because I don't know much about Sigyn, and I really wanted to know more about her. And the book really does highlight the fact that Loki is not just a trickster. Loki is also somebody who brought a lot of really good gifts to the gods, and also kind of got them, even though he caused a lot of the problems, he also got them out of a lot of problems at the same time. And it's like, we didn't give him enough credit for all of the things. And Loki is one of those things, one of those deities that if he comes into your life, yeah, he will cause some chaos and upheaval, but he will bring you profound wisdom and gifts and things that you would have never thought about getting before. And it really does match up with his lore. And it's just a phenomenal thing. So I could talk for hours. I could do a whole episode on Loki, you guys, but we're not going to, because literally I could talk forever about it. But the truth is, it's just an incredible thing. And I'd have to say that without working with some of my deities and without doing some of the, trance work, I probably wouldn't have the ability to communicate with them, or even the depth of the relationship with them without that.
Oh, totally. Work. I totally agree with that. There's something about shamanic journeying, trance work, that gives you a profound feeling, a depth of communication that I don't think it's something you can feel or sense with just a prayer or some kind of meditation that are not going as deep in a trance. And I think there's just no word for that. It's like you have to experience it. But the closest I could say is like, let's say you are seeing someone on or you're writing someone a letter, or you're talking to someone on the phone, compared to meeting someone in person and really feel their energy, feel their presence and their influence on you. Because in a journey, they can really carry you somewhere or give you some gifts, or, transform you with energy, bring you to places that when you're just more in the material world and less in the spirit world, you don't have that feeling. It's really come and touch your soul, pretty much. This is the best way I could describe that. Yeah.
That's an
incredible it's much more embodied way of connecting, like just feeling that with your entire being.
It's a soul connection, truly, truly. It's like, there's really no word. I mean, if you've never done a shamanic journey, I should give it a shot, because I remember my first shamanic journey. At some point I was going deep in the ocean, and I met with a being of light there. She was a kind of a shaman with, she was like tall, like 2 trees, let's say. I don't even know what, like a building maybe. She was made out of light, and her hair were made out of like thousands of different animals, and they were just kind of running in her. It was a weird, like her hair were alive, made out of animals. And I looked at her. There's no word. I feel like it was a Buddha moment.
I just felt like everything was perfect. I was at my inner peace, like 1000% in the, like I never felt like that. But when I met her, I saw her, and that was like, it felt like it was 5 minutes, but I think it was like 3 seconds. And wow, this is something I never felt just on day-to-day life, and my focus is not that good in general in life. So trying to be like in a mindful meditation without thinking and so on to get to reach that point would take me like 30 years. So I'm just saying that you can access that kind of feeling through journeying if you really let go, and if you allow the spirits to reach out to you and to touch your soul. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way to describe that, because honestly and truly, like, as we kind of talked a little bit before the podcast started, was the fact that I have ADHD in addition to MS and all that. And it is very hard some days to go into trance. And I would say that if I was required to go into a deep trance every single time, I couldn't do it. But I would say that the way that you guys kind of described it, of, allowing yourself to say, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes, even 5 minutes of trance, is way more than never trying to experience it, or saying, I can never do this. If you were limiting yourself by saying, I don't think I'll ever be able to get into a trance state. I have watched people go from 0 to trance in like a minute flat. And it's not hard to do when you allow your brain to do that, but you can't limit your thinking in doing it, because the moment you do, that's when you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
And there's many ways to get into that place. That's the thing, is that, for some people it will be very easy. Other people, they record dance, breath work. It can be, soul singing. It can be so many things. The drum, and just listening to the drum. It can be certain postures. So if one way doesn't necessarily work for you, then there's other way to try out. And that's it. That's the nice thing about it. Is that there's many. When you say that, there's a lot of roads that lead to Rome.
Lots of roads that lead to Rome. Yep. And
another thing that is very important is setting the stage for trance. It's not always something where you can, if you're living a stressful life and you just get home and you're like, okay, I'm going to go enter a shamanic trance, you put on the drum track and all that, it can be difficult to get into that space. But if you take the time to set up the area ceremonially, cleanse the area, cleanse yourself, create a peaceful and energetic environment, all these steps that can make trance much more likely to happen.
Yes, totally. And even in the lifestyle, depending, like, did you just ate a big meal? Did you have a coffee? Are you emotionally available, or right now you're kind of a train wreck, or wreck train? I don't know.
Train
wreck.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes, my French is coming back. So a train wreck, and you're not available. You have too much what you call emotional noise, or psychological noise, and there's too much self-talks, and you just can't. You have to first cleanse yourself, calm down, make space within you, because this is why I say it's like a trance is like a hollow bone. When you have space within you, then you are receptive, then you are able to receive what you need to receive from the spirits. And you cannot, try to fill up a cup that is already full. It doesn't work. So you have to make space to receive first. And sometimes this is difficult, when your head is all over the place. You have we all have a very busy and stressful, life. It's not easy. So yeah, it is a challenge to do that.
But it's one of those things too, where it's like, okay, if you are full of stress and you're, have a lifestyle that's getting in the way, don't worry about having to get all the way to the shamanic trance and everything. If you're just, if you're just doing things to help yourself in the moment, cleansing yourself, creating a calm environment around you, you're already doing wonderful first steps towards that
Yes.
shamanic living, right? You don't have to rush it. There's no race here. And so, just do those things spiritually that are good for your self-care, and eventually you'll find that you'll make it a habit, and then you'll find yourself ready for that
Yeah.
shamanic journeying.
And it's all about the small step. It's like if you feel not comfortable about letting loose, you can even just start by giving yourself permission to let loose. And if it's too much already, you can ask yourself small questions like, how would it feel like to give myself permission to be 10% more loose? Or how would it feel like to give 10% of control, to give it out? How would it feel like? And then you don't even try to answer. You just like let that sink, and you just go with your day. And then if you want, you can say 20%, 50%, 100%, for like 30 seconds. Let's say like, okay, for 30 seconds, I will let loose 100%. And you don't do more, because if it's difficult for you, you don't want to have the pressure, and you don't want to have the resistance, because one thing that is really in the way of our practice usually is the high expectation that we have on ourselves, that then brings us to have resistance to do anything, because we're thinking, I'm not good enough, or I don't have the time, or it won't be perfect, so why would I waste my time? And it's much more about the process. And you don't have to spend 45 minutes, 30 minutes, even 15 minutes on a trance. Like, just even getting in the mood, just giving yourself that permission is already huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even on our YouTube channel, we have a 5-minute drum track, because so many of our students were like, "Look, I want something very short that I can do, that I don't have time for 15 minutes." And so it's like, okay, fine, here's a 5-minute drum track. I don't know how much you'll get done in it, but okay, enter trance and at least have that state. Right?
That's enough to go and say hello and have a little bit of that spirit feeling, and then come back to the reality, if we can say it like that. Yeah,
that is an incredible description of everything. That's, if you're really wanting to start trance, that's the best way that I would describe how to really get into it, is to give yourself the permission to be like, yeah, I'm gonna just be gentle with myself and try. And any sort of trance work, I think that's the best thing that you could do. So we're about out of time, but this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you both so much for coming by. Can you tell everybody where they can find your stuff? Like, where can they find your show, your YouTube, all that good stuff?
Certainly. So you can find us at spiritworldcenter.com. And pretty much just searching for Spirit World Center on Google, you'll find many of our things. We have the Spirit World Center on YouTube. We have our Instagram account, which is spirit_world_center. And what else do we have? I think we have a Twitter account somewhere.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook as the Spirit World Center. So we're all over the place.
Yes, and if you see Spirit World Center, Eric and Laova, it's us.
There is a Spirit World Center. There's a there's a Spirit Center, but that is actually a large alcohol store down in the States that sells spirits. So that's the only other Google hit that might get confusing. But we are not an alcohol store. We are a Spirit World Center. So yeah, that's all available, and we have lots of cool resources on our website. We have drum tracks. If you go to our YouTube channel, we have all of our podcast episodes. We have a really, really good podcast that recently came out with a woman by the name of Brittany Pagan Atkins. And let's see, we have drum tracks on there. We have lots of cool resources and how-to videos. It's all over the place, but we have lots of cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. You guys are going to have to come back and tell me more amazing stories. Actually, tell me and the audience more amazing stories, because I would love to hear them, and I'm sure they would too. You guys have all heard where to find it, the Spirit World podcast and all of their other amazing content. You can also go listen to the interview that I did with them. I'm also going to be back on their show here in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. We're going
Yay.
to talk some more about all sorts of cool things. I don't even remember where we left off on the notes for the conversation, but I'm sure Eric has all those handled. But it was a great time last time, and it's going to be an even better time this time coming up. So thank you both so much for joining me. Y'all stay safe, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye-bye, everyone.